President Cyril Ramaphosa has referred the contentious Secrecy Bill back to Parliament. The proposed law has drawn criticism from civil society over the years while it was still before lawmakers. We're joined by Alison Tilley from the Right to Know campaign. Alison, good evening. Thanks for your time on News at Prime. Firstly, why did this particular piece of legislation not withstand scrutiny?
Well, there were a number of issues with the legislation at the time, and they were really around issues like its scheme of classification, which was overly broad. There were a range of offences and punishments it's established that we felt were unconstitutional, and there were also some transitional arrangements that were problematic. I think those were the sort of highlights in terms of the issues that we had with the legislation.
Does the fact that the President has sent it back to Parliament create room for some of the issues that you had previously identified to be dealt with and hopefully corrected?
Well, if Parliament is in fact able to deal with the legislation at this point, yes. And they would be in a position to amend the legislation in line with the concerns the President has raised and no doubt other concerns as well. If they were brought to their attention. There is some difficulty as to whether the President is in fact empowered to send it back to Parliament right now and whether it shouldn't go to the Constitutional Court, but no doubt we'll be discussing that in the coming days.
Let's talk about then the aspects of its constitutionality that have been largely contested.
Well, I think some of the issues are, as I say, around offences and penalties. And one of the key ones was criminalising the possession of classified information. So irrespective of when it was classified or how it came into your possession. So, those people who have filing cabinets going, several years, tens of years back with legislation that was classified, for example, pre-94, that legislation remained, those documents remain classified. And this legislation would criminalize the possession of that information, even though it's in the public domain and, there's no longer a purpose in classifying it. So, and that's just one of the many issues that we have with the legislation.
Sure. It's also been 10 years in the making, and I wonder just how different the state of play politically is, and, the extent to which there will be appetite to give civil society and perhaps even the media more of a platform to inform the amendments that need to be put in that also safeguards the right to be able to access important information that, like you said, may have previously been considered classified.
Well, I think this is a massive win for civil society. This was an issue that was raised by Right to Know, but grassroots organisations, NGOs, prominent people. It was something that moved people across society, and the fact that these concerns are finally being recognised is really very pleasing. Yes, if people are able to engage with this legislation, it can be significantly improved. There's no doubt of that. And if the President is prepared to support a political process around amending the legislation and improving it, perhaps the legal difficulties can be overcome.
The process of lawmaking can often be long and drawn out. Do you foresee that this could be the case with this particular bill?
Well, let's face it, this legislation started more or less around the time of the World Cup.
Yeah, 2010.
Exactly. So it's particularly fitting that it should be revived now around the anniversary. It's remarkable in many ways that legislation which was passed by Parliament hasn't been enacted and brought into operation. You would have thought that, that is the direction of Parliament and the will of the people. But yes, there are other pieces of legislation, not just this one, that make it through Parliament and then for various reasons, sit on the shelf, gather dust and are never brought into operation.
Sure. I wonder, given how draconian it's also have said to be, it also has previously, it's been said that it's quite draconian. Is one of the solutions to completely get rid of it so that it doesn't exist altogether?
Well, that's an option that was considered. I think the difficulty is that what the Secrecy Bill sought to do was regularize the position around information more generally that's held by the state. And there are a lot of concerns about the minimum information security standards, which is the document that attempts to regulate that. So in some ways, there is a need for the overhaul of security standards around information, especially considering how fast we've moved in the last 10 years.
All right.